Well, hi everybody. My name is Dr. Matt Dorsey. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer and Formulator for CHOQ, and today we've got a couple of really excellent, amazing guests that I'm really excited to talk about. We have Dr. Sanni Raju, CEO of Natreon, who manufactures our Shilajit. He has a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences. Real quick, Dr. Sanni, would you like to say hello?
Hi. Hi.
Great. All right. Thanks so much for being here. This is going to be really exciting. And then we also have Dr. Anthony Thomas. He is the Director of Scientific Affairs at Natreon. Dr. Thomas's training is he has a PhD in nutritional biology and an excellent research background. Yeah. So thanks very much for being here, both of you guys. This is going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is good to be with you.
For sure. Okay, so either of you guys feel free to chime in. I'll just start. Just tell us really quickly, what exactly is Shilajit?
Anthony, you can start on that.
Okay. Well, I've been reading into this, Matt. This is an adopted area of interest for me since joining the Natreon team, and the more I read about it, the more excited I get about it. But it was funny because I was with a company before on the finished goods side like yourself, formulating ingredients, and we also use this ingredient. And it was one that I never gave a lot of attention to. I never really understood it well. But again, reading more about it, I see so much potential for this. And it's this sticky brown to blackish secretion that comes from steep rocks in mountainous regions of the world, especially the Himalayas, Pamir, and Altai Mountains in Central Asia. And people might be saying, what is a secretion from these rocks? Well, right. It's apparently during hot summer months, this oozes out of cracks and fissures, and it's generally on steep slopes and cliffs at high altitudes. And I read about 1,000 to 5,000 meters. And so for most of us in the US, we think about feet. So that's over 3,000 to over 16,000 feet where this is originating from. Wow. And people might say, well, what is this stuff? Well, we've done compositional analysis, and it is primarily comprised of organic material, so humus and organic compounds, and it's also has various minerals in trace amounts. So it's primarily organic in nature, and it's derived from the gradual decomposition of primarily plant material over long periods of time, and it's compressed in these layers of rocks, and that's why we now see it ooze out sometimes, and it will accumulate on the rock surface and harden. And so it's been revered for thousands of years in Ayurveda and traditional medical practices, and have been used by local populations for just a variety of benefits. And they would collect it, break it off these rocks, and then they would purify it to use either orally or topically. And so I know we're going to get more into that, but this is where it's coming from essentially.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know it was used topically as well. Yeah. And Dr. Sanni, you had some. Yeah.
It is. I was reading a history book, and all of a sudden I see on one page that British archaeologists in 1920, while they were excavating Indus Valley civilization in northwestern India, they found physical evidence of use of a substance called Shilajit. I almost fell off the table. I mean, for more than 3,000 years it has been used. That really opened my eyes to promote this product, Even in India, a lot of people don't know this product because it was supposed to be very scarce and a very valuable product. So very few people knew. Even here, we really brought this product to recognition in this in the Western market as well as a lot of Indian market too.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's we really developed the product over a period of 40 years. Our professor, when we were in pharmacy school in India, Dr. Ghosal is the one who first started working on the chemistry of this product. And today, at the age of 90, he's still our technical advisor at Natreon.
Wow, that's fantastic. I take it he takes Shilajit every day.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
I could tell you, Matt,
absolutely.
when I was digging into some of the science and reading about Shilajit in the scientific literature, and I just kept coming across that name, Dr. Shibnath Ghosal, and I'm like, wow, this is the guy who literally developed the purified Shilajit extract that we now use, branded Prima V, and so he's the one that developed it, and he's probably, from what I can see, one of the foremost experts in the world on Shilajit.
That's fantastic. And you said he's 90 and he's still at it.
Yeah,
that really says something.
He's the first one to discover dibenzo alpha pyrone and 2 molecules which are now called urolithins.
Right.
There is
urolithins,
Yep. He was the first one to discover those in Shilajit. And then, of course, we isolated them, we synthesized them, we got even graphs done on those 2 molecules, and we are ready to do mitochondrial function clinical studies.
That's excellent. Yeah, the urolithins I would like to spend some time on in just a little bit after we knock out 1 or 2 other questions. But that's one of the more exciting parts for me because I'm mitochondrial fanatic. It's definitely a large area of study, an area that applies a lot to. Also, when I'm just seeing clients, in my private practice, mitochondrial health is such a big deal.
Yep, absolutely.
So really excited to go down that rabbit hole with you guys. I'm wondering also, in terms of, before we get into the hard science, classically speaking, how does Ayurveda view Shilajit? What are some of its actions within that more classical system?
It's because of its purported ability to give local Sherpas. So this is a Tibetan ethnic group, native to the mountainous regions of Nepal and the Himalayas. And this was a component of their diets, and it was purported to give them the stamina and strength to summit these high mountain peaks like Mount Everest, right?
Right.
And this is a group known for their speed climbing records and their ascent of routes that nobody else can ascend. And Shilajit was thought to give them that strength and stamina. And so sure enough, it was generally recognized for supporting energy production and therefore mental and physical health, broadly speaking. But as far as general treatments, I mean, I've read that it was given to children in their milk to just support growth and development. It was used for people with high blood sugar or help to facilitate wound healing or soft tissue injuries like tendon sprains, broken bones. I mean, all over the board you see all these uses. But I would say what I've seen consistently is the support of energy production. And in Ayurveda, it was considered a resayana or a rejuvenator. And these are generally recognized for promoting vitality and longevity and just overall well-being. So really, as you mentioned with Dr. Ghosal and how he's 90 years old, and we joked he's probably using Shilajit. Well, that is exactly what it was used for, is to maintain health as we age and give people strength and energy. So very broad therapeutic potential, I would say, from my reading.
Traditionally, Shilajit has been used as a male enhancer, male health enhancer, primarily sexual health. That is how it was traditionally used, but that benefit may have been coming from mitochondrial function enhancement.
Right, exactly.
And then we,
That's a really great point. When I was reviewing before this, I read my own blog on Shilajit, and I remembered that at some point I referenced the fact that mitochondrial health and testosterone and reproductive health are very intertwined. A lot of people don't know that. That's an interesting relationship that I think is unknown amongst people who maybe aren't as nerdy as we are. Would you guys like to speak to that connection a little bit between those two areas?
I can give a little side story I think you guys might find interesting. In my last position, within the dietary supplement industry, I worked with various researchers across the globe, academia and industry. And one in academia, and he's a fertility expert, Dr. Bob Casper, I think he's up in Toronto. And he was highly interested in using ubiquinol, the reduced form of coenzyme Q10, and he'd done research showing that it improved both female and male fertility. And then he was also interested in another compound called abbreviated PQQ. You've probably heard of this compound.
Yep.
And this one is also associated with supporting mitochondrial health and function. And so he was looking at that to improve sperm motility. And one of the issues with sperm motility is that, that they use a lot of energy, right?
Of course.
To get where they need to go. And they produce many reactive oxygen species that can be damaging to the cell and its functionality. And so they need these antioxidant defenses. And of course, the mitochondria, being the energy producing organelle of cells, is both a source of oxidants and is very susceptible to oxidative damage. And so various quote unquote antioxidants has shown benefits with regard to supporting sperm motility.
Sure.
And what's interesting is, in my reading for Shilajit, of course, is that it was used traditionally to treat impotence and also just generally as an aphrodisiac, right? To support male sexual health and well-being. And so it doesn't surprise me that you would see these benefits. And now that we know Shilajit is one of the few sources of natural preformed urolithins, right? These compounds that are now being investigated for supporting mitochondrial function, that these would likely be important components to mediate that benefit. But also the fulvic acid is just a broad antioxidant. And so I've read, I think that a lot of this has to do both with supporting antioxidant defenses and generally supporting mitochondrial function and energy production. And you've seen that translate into these benefits.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, the urolithins, which are present in Shilajit, pure urolithins, we have done antioxidant studies, and urolithin A has ORAC value of something like 90,000 micromoles Trolox per gram. That's very high. Our Capros product, which is a super antioxidant, amla extract has 47,000, but urolithin A has 90,000.
Wow. So it sounds like Shilajit is both a direct and an indirect antioxidant in the sense that it has some of the compounds like urolithin, right? Lithins have a direct, measurable via ORAC, but then I've also seen studies where it's had positive effects on glutathione, on catalase, superoxide dismutase.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You know what's interesting, Matt, is that a lot of people in our industry throw the term antioxidant around, and it's almost like a nebulous term at this point, right? And as you just mentioned, there's direct and there's indirect antioxidants, and antioxidants can also work in different fashions, we know. And I recently came across some literature and said that in the ORAC test, urolithins perform very well. However, in lots of other cell-based tests, they don't perform so well as traditional antioxidants. And in fact, they can be pro-oxidants. And I'd like to remind people that, we have antioxidant defenses built into our system, right, in cells. And they're sensitive to changes in what we call redox status or reduction oxidation status of the cell. And so when cells come under quote unquote oxidative stress, these defenses get enhanced and upregulated to counterbalance that so the cell can continue to function normally and healthy, because if it's too oxidative for too long, then you could damage functions, right? And so a lot of these natural compounds, while they may demonstrate quote unquote antioxidant effects in test tubes, I think that's an oversimplistic view of how they function in the body. And in reality, I see them as these redox sensitive compounds that interact with various proteins and cellular targets that are responsive to these changes in redox status. And of course, I just mentioned these antioxidant defenses are upregulated when there's stress, not when, everything's good and right? So we see that, as you mentioned, I read too, treating cells with urolithin, it enhanced levels of glutathione, which is the cell's primary endogenous antioxidant. And it reduced lipid so it actually enhances the cell's antioxidant defenses too. And another thing we mentioned previously, right, the mitochondria is a source of oxidants over time. And mitochondria can become dysfunctional. And there's a process by which dysfunctional mitochondria, or at least some of their components, can be degraded and removed from the cell. And that's a process called mitophagy. Mito for mitochondria and phagy for eating or self-eating.
Right.
And
it's like a way of saying mitochondrial autophagy, compressing it essentially, right?
Yeah, so the term autophagy, right, for self-eating of other cellular components, right? And mitophagy specifically for mitochondria. Well, it looks like urolithins specifically, at least at a certain level, support this mitochondrial turnover. I remember it being referred
really
to
cool.
once, like, I'm in California. We had a program here. I think it might have been nationwide, but it was back in the day when I was young, called Cash for Clunkers, and they tried to get you to give you some financial incentive to get rid of your pollution generating old car and get something new that's a little more efficient. So if you think about it like that, so I think urolithins are having many potential benefits. But like you said, acting through the mitochondria, and then just to give people a little context. We know that oxidative stress and this chronic low-grade inflammation, they're essentially hallmarks of aging and most chronic disease states associated with aging or lifestyle, right? But the other component of that is what we call mitochondrial dysfunction. And just as we age, this is a consequence. And so really, there's high interest in the academic sector and also in the industry to identify ingredients and compounds that specifically support mitochondrial function and health, and also this process of mitochondrial turnover. So getting rid of the bad ones and leaving the efficient ones behind.
Very great. And Dr. Sanni, you had for sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. There are three main segments of how Shilajit works in the body. One is by its antioxidant properties. Second is mitochondrial function enhancement.
Right.
Recently, a paper was published from a group who used to be at Ohio State University, but then they moved to Indiana University. They worked on our urolithins. And urolithin A compared to Niagen, which is nicotinamide riboside, it is 5 times more potent.
Wow.
Urolithin A for improving mitochondrial function.
Wow.
It increased the ratio of NAD over NADH significantly.
That's excellent.
That paper is published, and if you don't have it, Anthony can send a copy of that to you.
That's excellent.
And another major action of Shilajit is collagen gene upregulation.
Right, yeah.
It is not just collagen, I think it upregulated in 2 human clinical studies at Ohio State University Medical Center. Mostly collagen 1A1, it upregulated tremendously, and many other extracellular matrix protein genes.
Right. I just think it's so important to have a more of a broad spectrum approach to collagen. Most people think the only way to boost collagen is just to take collagen supplements, right? And I won't speak to whether or not those are worth it. I'm sure there's a diversity of opinions on that. But of course, just like any other tissue in the body, there are different ways of enhancing the body's natural production of that tissue. So you don't have to eat. I tell people, in order to have good brain function, you don't have to eat brains. In order to have good collagen, you don't have to eat collagen, right? So Shilajit, just to reiterate what you were saying, my understanding is they did epigenetic analysis to see which genes were activated to which extent after taking Shilajit, essentially, right? And then they were able to show certain genes that are responsible for collagen production were upregulated many fold.
Absolutely. And see, many people don't understand the importance of extracellular matrix.
Right, yeah. Tell us what is, and just for those who don't know, what exactly is the ECM, the extracellular matrix? How can we define that?
See, all the cells, right, and the tissues in the body, they have to work together. And each cell is discrete unit, but they have to have a medium. through which they all communicate and all that.
Almost.
Yeah. So,
Right.
so ECM provides that communication channel between the cells, and also it provides the scaffolding to hold all the tissues, everything in place. There are many other functions, of course, communication between the cells and all that. So overall, collagen and these extracellular matrix proteins are a part of every part of the body.
That's right.
Right.
Skin, the collagen in skin is predominantly collagen 1A1, and 70% of skin is collagen.
Right.
And 30% of bone is collagen.
Yeah. That's a huge percentage.
Yeah, ECM is all collagen probably, pretty much.
Right.
So any upregulation of collagen should have tremendous effect on overall health.
That's excellent. And if you were one of those Sherpas, in addition to having good mitochondrial energy production, you'd also want to have good bones and good joints, right?
Absolutely.
So it makes a lot of sense. It's the ideal thing for them.
What's interesting is when I saw this data, right, it reminded me of what I read about as far as traditional uses, as far as facilitating recovery from injury, wound repair, very critical for extracellular matrix, bone fractures.
Sure.
And as Sanni mentioned, people, and again, I come from an industry perspective where you see how products are marketed, and of course, hydrolyzed collagen peptides, they're often positioned in the quote unquote beauty from within category to support skin health. But as Sanni mentioned, collagen is the most abundant protein in your body, and it's a component of extracellular matrix, which is a component of every tissue, but it's particularly enriched in tissues that are rich in connective tissue. So cartilage, your joints, your skin, your bone.
Yep.
And of course, I love when we have clinical data to support what we see traditionally shown in Ayurveda, right? And so we had recently conducted a study in postmenopausal women, which of course have higher risks of bone loss and fracture later in life. And we wanted to see if Shilajit had any benefits. And sure enough, it showed great benefits as helping to preserve bone tissue, discourage loss that you typically would see in this population. And like you mentioned, it's like there's more to bone than minerals. And the organic component of bone, which is, like Sanni said, 30%, 90% of that is collagen. And it serves as both a scaffold, as you mentioned, for the deposition of minerals, but also is what gives bone its tensile strength. And I guess for our viewers, a good example is picture a pencil, and if you bend it, it will snap. But if you bend like the pink eraser, it will give you a little more bend before it will fracture. And that's how collagen essentially can act in bone. You want to give a little bend without it fracturing. If it was just mineral, it would snap in half.
Yeah, I like to draw from my background, for those who don't know, I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And for us, collagen is the wood element, which relates to the liver and gallbladder, right? And what they say is, so wood, right, obviously it's symbolized by the tree. And when its branches are flexible, then the tree is strong, right?
Yep.
And then when the branches lose their flexibility, they can become brittle and break.
That's right.
And so just that same metaphor, just like with bones, right? You need a little bit of elasticity. You need some flexibility. Interestingly enough, in Chinese medicine, we also relate that to mental and emotional flexibility as well. When you have a strong liver gallbladder, that's a whole other story.
Absolutely.
But it's just from the more, I like to, I always like to throw in some of the traditional perspectives on some of this stuff to provide a nice counterbalance to the all the hard science. But it's all great. It's just a lot of fun to kind of, go back and forth between these two totally different worlds,
All these actions of Shilajit have been, especially our primary Shilajit, have been proven by human clinical studies, done at very premier institutes. So really a product. I always wonder, how did our ancient people knew something coming from the rock is going to be good for you?
Right, exactly. How?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Just like with some of these other compounds, these other herbs, how were they first discovered,
Absolutely.
I had a quick comment. I think this would be a good time to remind our listeners, too, that the crude Shilajit that is collected from the mountains is not our ingredient, right? Our ingredient
That's
is,
very
is a
important.
highly purified,
Let's
highly refined
differentiate
material.
for the viewers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and that gets to my question of what is different about this particular Shilajit, the one that we use in our CHOQ products and our CHOQ Daily, as well as CHOQ Shilajit standalone that you all manufacture. What are some of the most salient differences between this and then what we would call more of a tar in a jar style Shilajit, right? Just the jar with the tar in it. Not that they're all bad per se, but there's so many of them out there. The reason that CHOQ didn't go with something like that is because it doesn't have the same kind of science behind it. So if you would like to differentiate that a little bit from a lot of these tar in a jar type products, that would be helpful.
Well, Sanni, I can finish my thought from
Go
last,
ahead.
and I was going to say, so just even raw crude Shilajit from various mountain regions can differ qualitatively, right? Or quantitatively. Of course, it's qualitatively similar, but quantitatively it differs in its biologically active constituents, and it's those constituents that dictate the therapeutic potential. And research has shown that therapeutic potential varies by region. And also in some of the preclinical research, that the Shilajit needed to be processed to have its benefits primarily. And that crude Shilajit may not always perform. And that may be in part because it can be naturally contaminated with heavy metals, mycotoxins, and some other oxidants, right? But we use a proprietary process, again, developed by the foremost expert in Shilajit, Dr. Shibnath Ghosal. And the process essentially removes heavy metals to well below levels that are acceptable here in California, which is the most stringent, I would imagine, in the world.
Sure.
And it removes these microbial toxicants to well below levels that are considered safe. And so it's very important that the Shilajit is processed in a way to ensure its safety. And I would like to mention that Prima V purified Shilajit extract is the only GRAS-affirmed Shilajit ingredient for oral consumption. So that's the only one that's GRAS-affirmed with FDA as far as I know.
And that for those who don't know, that means generally recognized as safe is the
that's
term.
right.
If for those who haven't heard that. Right.
So the take-home message I'd say is because we started talking, we talked traditionally about Shilajit, but then we started mentioning some specific clinical trials using our purified Shilajit extract, and listeners really shouldn't conflate the results of our research with any other Shilajit ingredient because they do differ by composition, which of course will dictate their functionality in the body.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Yeah.
Yep.
So and Dr. Sanni, whatever you'd like to say in a moment, but also if you do have any input on, let's talk about a few of the specific studies on this Shilajit, if we can, the ones that we that Natreon has performed on this particular extract.
Yeah, we have done quite a few studies. We have done a cardiovascular study in diabetic people, but of course that's not healthy population.
Right.
But then we have done testosterone studies in healthy people as well as in oligospermic people, and we have done collagen upregulation study in skeletal muscle, human study, and also in skin, human study. Both were done at Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. And then we have done recently bone health study, which, Anthony has just talked about. Anthony, if you want to go over briefly on each study, please do so.
Okay. Well, let me follow up really fast with what I was saying before about the composition, right? Because this dictates its functionality. And Prima V purified Shilajit extract is a highly purified and standardized ingredient. And so we talked a little bit about the biologically active constituents that are desirable, that are likely mediating many of the benefits. And that's the urolithins and fulvic acid, right? And so Prima V is standardized to no less than 50% fulvic acid. And I could say just from looking at spec sheets, it's generally well above 60%. Urolithins, both free and those conjugated to chromoproteins, those are no less than 10.3%.
Wow.
And we've done some analyses. It's also a source of humic acid. It's generally present in the range of 12 to 18%. So if you add some of that up, what you see is basically 90% plus accounted for in this material.
Yep.
And these are the most desirable biologically active constituents in raw crude Shilajit from our reading of the scientific literature. So
wow.
Yeah, it's been used in a number of clinical studies. Sanni had mentioned both its traditional use. We followed that up with some clinical research and showed that in healthy men, you can increase free and total testosterone levels. And if you look in men that are infertile, you can also increase testosterone, reduce oxidative stress, and this, of course, translates to improved sperm count and motility.
Right.
So you're going to increase your odds maybe of
And I feel like reproductive health obviously is important in and of itself, but it's also just a marker for overall vitality and health within someone's body, I feel like, right? It's,
Right.
It's another way of just assessing your total health. And of course, like we mentioned before, very much relates to mitochondrial function as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think I have in my notes here, I wrote, let's see here, what was it? Testosterone actually can protect mitochondria against free radical damage directly. Have you heard that? I found a study that said that.
Interesting. That's the first time I've heard that directly.
Yeah.
I would love to know how it directly.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to find that reference for you and send it to you. And hopefully I'm not wrong. If I am wrong, please correct me in the comments if there's anyone nerdy enough to actually do that research. Also, just FYI, if you're, for anybody watching this, ask me anything in the comments if you'd like, if you have any technical questions on this stuff, and I will personally answer your questions. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So so we have an increases in total testosterone, free testosterone, and also DHEA or DHEAS specifically, right? The sulfated form of DHEA, right?
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, so let's just say DHEA is sort of like a master precursor to all these different hormones. Is that correct?
Yep.
Right. It's a precursor to testosterone, which is the precursor to estrogen, right?
Right.
So a lot of people think
right.
of these.
Exactly. Yeah. And
people actually forget this. I actually, in its own right, it has anabolic effects, but also, I was reading, we think of cortisol also produced by the adrenals in response to stress, right? We call this the stress hormone. Well, DHEA is secreted coincidentally with cortisol, and that's in part to blunt some of the negative effects cortisol can have over time, because if you have an uncontrolled stress response or excessive stress, this leads to dysfunction, and so DHES largely mediates opposing effects to cortisol, and so
interesting.
Over time the adrenals can be fatigued by stress, and you'll see a drop off in DHES production,
right.
And so you see hormones like estrogen and testosterone drop, but some of these compounds like Shilajit, like you said, it supported DHES levels. This would be also good to counterbalance the negative effects of stress and cortisol as a manifestation of that stress in the body.
When I'm coaching some of my own clients, I like to tell them about this, that, let's take a biological angle to reproductive health, right? So if you're in an environment, if the organism is in an environment that is extremely stressful, extremely dangerous, then that does not bode well for survival. Or, for example, right? So especially for a female, right? If you're actually going to be a lot more vulnerable if you're carrying a fetus, if you're pregnant, right? Vulnerable to predators. If you're in an environment where there's maybe not adequate water or food, where there are too many threats, too many predators, then it makes sense that biologically it just makes sense that your body would downregulate reproductive behaviors. Because that's just, and so you have to think of everything in terms of, biology or evolutionary biology. Things that make a lot more sense when you think of it that way,
That's right.
Yeah.
Another aspect we haven't covered here is Shilajit has more than 40 different microminerals.
Right.
About 10%, 10 to 15% of Shilajit is actually minerals, and Fulvic acid, which is the major component in Shilajit, it is known to enhance absorption of minerals.
Right. Exactly.
Actually, plants use their own version of fulvic acid to absorb minerals from the soil.
So if someone were taking a multi-mineral, they might want to take Shilajit with that multi-mineral.
Absolutely.
Right. Or mineral-rich foods even. Yeah.
And Shilajit itself has 40 minerals.
Right.
And some of them we may not be getting through other supplements or foods or whatever.
Sure.
So which may be essential to our body's functioning. You know,
This is really this is an interesting area that I've talked to Sanni and Dr. Raju about exploring more, and we actually have some preliminary data showing that the Prima V Shilajit supported absorption of coenzyme Q10, and coenzyme Q10 has notoriously poor solubility and absorption, like many popular ingredients in our industry. Curcuminoids, astaxanthin, these things are very poorly soluble, and so they exhibit very poor absorption from the gut. And so, I'm very interested to know if taking, fulvic acid rich Prima V Shilajit, are you facilitating, better absorption of some of these other health promoting compounds? And is this one of the ways that it's enhancing health indirectly, right? But
Sure. So it's highly synergistic with anything that has good mineral content, as well as
just anything that has poor solubility. It tends to support solubility because these, fulvic acids and humic acids are very complex molecules that have charges and rich in oxygen and carbon, and so they can complex and attract with other nutrients to support their solubility, which is why minerals are very poorly soluble when they're ionized, right? They need to be kind of bound up to maintain solubility, and so fulvic acids can essentially act as carriers, like Sanni mentioned, and they're used as such in agriculture to support plant growth and their ability to pull nutrients into the plant from the soil.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. Very interesting. Anything else specifically with respect to fulvic acid? In my notes here, I do have that fulvic acid is one of the components of Shilajit that does have effects on these antioxidants like glutathione, SOD, catalase, I believe. I also have here that it can support a healthy inflammation response, support healthy levels of CHOQ as well. That's another interesting one as well.
Yeah, there are a few fulvic acids out in the market. In fact, we have tested about 4 fulvic acids, and none of them is actually even an organic compound. They're all minerals. Some of them have very high levels of sulfur, high levels of iron, and some are just charcoal. They're elemental carbon. They're not. They're not even organic carbon. They're not.
Caveat true. Buyer beware if you're buying fulvic acid. Buy it from a company who actually understands science.
That's right.
And is willing to put the money into the R&D to make sure that they have a product that's actually effective, right? And that's, I just like to emphasize, the reason that CHOQ picked Prima V as our Shilajit is because we are a science-based company. We use many trademarked research-based ingredients, because those are the ones where we can actually say, look, we have data on this exact version of this herb, not just this herb in general, for example, or this herbomineral, whatever it is, this compound. We have research on this exact particular trademarked one, and we can tell you that, for example, within 90 days, you're going to get this kind of increase in free testosterone, It's nice to be able to make those kinds of claims. So, with respect to the reason that we use highly researched trademarked ingredients, one of them is going to be that we've got more clinicals to actually back up our statements, and we can be more confident, when we're talking about this. The other one is going to be more of on a safety and quality level, right? So like we were saying, Shilajit, like we were saying before, can have a lot of heavy metals. You have to be very, very careful with it. It has to be correctly purified, and it has to be lab analyzed, right? And that's another reason that we're comfortable using this particular Shilajit, because it has tremendous safety.
Yeah, we use the latest analytical techniques such as high pressure liquid chromatography, ultra high pressure liquid chromatography. We use the latest analytical techniques to do analysis.
Right, and I think y'all's credentials also really speak to the company and what you guys do. The fact that you have people with your level of training, and that you have that level of professionalism and that science background. Just wanted to throw that in there. But yeah, anyway, Dr. Thomas, please continue.
I was saying that I had read about, the purity is often reflected in the solubility of the ingredient, and ours is it's a proprietary process, but the only solvent used is water, so it's essentially solvent free, and if you ever break open a capsule of this, and if it was just the Prima V purified Shilajit extract, it's basically completely soluble in water. So it reflects its very high degree of purity. And so also,
That's
Matt,
great.
there's a couple, you might want to edit this out, but I didn't finish talking about other research, muscle and any of those things, if you want to touch on that. By the
Sure,
way.
yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to hit on some of the mitochondrial stuff too.
Yep.
I wanted to give just really fast, if I could, I want to give a quick, just a little detour where we just talk about mitochondria and their general importance, and then let's relate that back to Shilajit for a second. I actually, by the time this video is on YouTube, there will also be another video where I'm talking with our nutritional correspondent, Ryan, about mitochondria for over 20 minutes, just kind of nerding out about that. One of the reasons I think it's so important is because a lot of people don't realize that, mitochondria, actually they talk to the genes in the nucleus, right? In the sense of they're offering feedback of, based on how they're performing, right? That changes gene expression within the nucleus, right? So there's this kind of dialogue, and one way I've put it is it's almost like they're like the money people, right? Where the nucleus is like, do we have enough energy, enough money to do this project, right? Like maybe they're like the producers for like a movie set, right? Or for a movie rather, right? You want to have this big car chase, you want to have lots of CGI, you want to wreck 20 cars, and then the producers are like, well, that's really not on budget. We can't add that car chase, because we just don't have enough money. We don't have enough ATP for that. So the actual gene activation in the nucleus is dependent to some extent, or to a fairly large extent, I'm told, by Dr. Doug Wallace, who is one of the top mitochondrial researchers in the world, mitochondrial geneticist, largely dependent on what's going on in the mitochondria and how they're performing, how efficiently they're able to produce energy. And so there is that huge dialogue. And just again, for those who don't know, maybe a lot of people watching this do know, but epigenetics is the study of gene activation. So just because you have a gene doesn't mean it's necessarily being used. So in a just a layperson's sense, a gene is either on or off, and many, many different things, including nutrients and toxins and stressors, and then also mitochondrial function can determine whether those genes are on or off. So mitochondrial health is really, really huge. Also, I would like to say we're really passionate at CHOQ about detoxification. We have a lot of blog articles. If you go on choq.com/blog, we have a whole bunch of blog articles on different kinds of toxins, things like PFAs and pesticides and heavy metals and their effects on the body and how important healthy detoxification is.
Yep.
And one of the reasons is because so many of these toxins are toxic to the mitochondria. They are mitotoxic. There's quite a few, and we're finding more and more that are mitotoxic all the time. So that's another area just in your mind to connect healthy detoxification to mitochondrial health because of these mitotoxic compounds. But yeah, I just wanted to say that really fast, just to hammer home how important mitochondrial function is. That's just a small sliver of why it's important, but without waxing physiological for too long, I'll just kind of leave it at that. But yeah, feel free to relate that back to Shilajit and what it does for us.
No,
Well, it's interesting because, go ahead, Sanni.
Yeah, just quickly, we are getting a patent from European Union on our Shilajit for upregulation of collagen genes, and we are getting a U.S. patent on improvement of blood microperfusion to the facial skin by Shilajit.
Wow.
These are based on the studies from Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center.
That's fantastic. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Matt, to echo what you were saying, just to help our listeners is, it's funny when we talk about energy, we think about the motivation to get out of bed or get to the gym and put in some time on the treadmill. But when you were talking about cellular energy, you mentioned ATP. That's essentially the cellular energy currency, right? And this is what is produced in high amounts by the mitochondria. And just to remind everybody, without the ATP continually being made available by the mitochondria, cellular functions become compromised, and that can lead to damage that ultimately leads to death. And if more cells die, you get dysfunction. And so, when you're thinking about cellular energy, it's critical to all processes, and it needs to be continually managed. And so mitochondria, these are workhorses. They're dynamic organelles. They're not just these static, You know, they're derived from bacteria. They even have some of their own DNA, mitochondrial DNA, that codes for some of these critical proteins that support their functions. And so I mentioned early on in the discussion that these organelles are very sensitive to oxidative stress. They actually produce reactive oxidants that are managed by our antioxidant defenses. And of course, the stress comes when our defenses are overloaded and can't basically handle the oxidants being produced. And that can compromise, of course, energy production, cellular function, and this will ultimately manifest into dysfunction at the organism level, right? And so, again, traditional use was to support energy production, so for mental and physical performance. And we have a number of clinical studies showing that. So we did a preclinical study in rodents, and we showed that it enhanced swimming endurance in that model. And then we had a pilot research in both rodents and humans that showed, so when you exercise, ATP levels decline in your muscle, right? Because you're using the ATP as a source of energy to facilitate the function. And we showed that after exercise, if you had also supplemented with the Prima V purified Shilajit, you actually had higher levels of ATP in the skeletal muscle than if you weren't supplementing. And of course, this translated to some improved performance as well. So the thought is, hey, it's facilitating mitochondrial function and energy production. And this of course can contribute to various aspects of health and very noticeably cognitive function, so mental health and also physical performance. And Sanni had mentioned the collagen upregulation, right? Very critical component for all tissues, but of course skeletal muscle, right? Yep. And so they showed these genes being upregulated in skeletal muscle. But of course, if you add resistance training, so weightlifting, so high intense exercise that damages muscle, you get further augmentation of upregulation of these genes. So that European patent he mentioned is surrounding that upregulation to facilitate muscle recovery and adaptation to the exercise. This is what we want, right?
Yeah. Wow.
We were doing it so that our muscles get stronger and repair. I always remind people, like, exercise is a stressor. In and of itself, I wouldn't say it's good. It's the adaptation, both metabolically and physically, to that stressor that leads to the health benefits. And so we have all this research that essentially, in my view, is starting to build on these historic and traditional uses. So what Natreon loves to do is basically bridge the gap between tradition and experience-based practice to evidence-based,
and that's why there's such a resonance, because CHOQ we have the exact same approach. You know, try to harness the best of both worlds and bridge that gap, like you said. I refer to myself personally as medically bilingual, because as an acupuncturist, you have to learn quite a bit of, just anatomy and physiology, pathophysiology, Western medicine stuff. But of course, you also learn lots and lots and lots of Chinese medicine terminology.
Sure.
And not to mention the herbs that you're learning in pinyin, right? So when you hear two acupuncturists talk about herbs, you're literally hearing them speak, Chinese to each other. You're like, oh, should we put the Tian Ma back in Tian Ma Go Tian Yang? Do we put extra Tian Ma, or do you want to put Gansao in there? Anyway, I digress. But long story short, that whole idea of having your foot in two different worlds and bridging those gaps. I was always, when I was in school studying this stuff, I was trying to translate between the two worlds, right? When we talk about liver qi stagnation, what could that actually mean that has to do with the real liver, right? Does it have to do with something with, say, for example, hormone metabolism, right? And that affecting the mood, right? Who knows, right? So anyway, bridging those gaps. And I think that some of the most dynamic conversations right now in health are attempting to do that, bridging all of these thousands of years of traditional knowledge, finding out what in there is actually really legitimate area to study.
Yeah, no, that's, Shilajit is an excellent product for athletes too, because it is synergistic. Its collagen upregulation is synergistic with exercise, as Dr. Thomas just mentioned. It's a wonderful product across all ages, actually. We will find more and more as we do more and more studies. We will be planning an anti-aging study, which would be a very comprehensive study. Dr. Thomas and I are thinking about planning a study like that.
Oh, that would be interesting. I'd be interested to see what the outcomes are.
Yep.
How all the different ways that you're measuring.
Yeah, we will actually let you contribute to that protocol.
Very cool.
Yeah. That way, you're an expert yourself, so we would like to take your input into that.
Excellent. Sure. Yeah, I would love to. It's lots of fun. Well, I guess we're going to wrap up here in just a second. Before we do that, do you guys have anything else you'd like to add? Anything we haven't gotten to talk about yet?
Only thing I would say is about myself. I'm now 69 years old.
Wow.
And in 2016, I climbed the Rockefeller Center in New York by steps, which is 66 floors.
Wow. In your mid-60s, you did that. Wow.
Yeah, when I was 65 years old.
65, yeah.
Yeah, and I attribute that to Shilajit.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I once I started taking it, I don't like to miss too many doses myself.
That's right.
Yeah, it's definitely become recently in the last few years one of my favorite adaptogens. Out of all of them, and I'm a connoisseur of adaptogens, so that was really saying something. Dr. Thomas, anything to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, personal use for me too. I'm turning 40 this year, so
Nice.
Don't have quite the hop in my step, and I've self-described. I've been a lifelong athlete, and being someone that's been active for most of his life, you start to notice when you're not recovering so much or performing as well.
Sure.
And so this has been a very welcome addition recently too, as I'm emerging from COVID restrictions in California and starting to be active again. And this is definitely a cornerstone ingredient that I use. But I use lots of supplements, admittedly, from my experience.
I'm sure we all do.
Yeah, I'm just really excited about the future research with this one. I'm a trained scientist, but I'm not a stickler when it comes to certain research. You'll hear people like, you need gold standard, double-blind, placebo-controlled.
Right.
That's great, but really what you got to do is look at the body of evidence. There's observational evidence, and we talked a lot about experience-based and traditional uses, and I would argue that, yes, they may be lacking systemic documentation and scientific evaluation to some extent, but we should never dismiss experience. Mm-hmm. Experience tends to be one of the best teachers in all aspects of life, right?
Absolutely.
And so when you can marry that, you get this very strong potential. And so I'm excited to explore more benefits with research, particularly now that urolithins are getting more recognition, particularly for their mitochondrial health benefits. And I don't know if everyone knows, but there's not really sources of urolithins naturally in the diet, right? These are actually derived, at least for humans, they're derived from elagitannins in various foods. So mostly berries, some nuts, walnuts, pecans maybe. Right. And you can imagine, and this is relying on, and these compounds aren't absorbed. You get ellagic acid released, but that ellagic acid, even though it's not absorbed, it reaches the colon where you have a high density of microbes colonizing your body. In fact, you have more colonizing microbes in your gut alone than you have cells in your body. So you're more microbial, and their collective genetic capacity is like a whole independent organ. So they have genes that code for enzymes that can do things we don't have enzymes for. And some of those are metabolizing these highly complex molecules, right? And so it's the gut microbiota that's responsible for producing urolithins from these elagitannins and ellagic acid. Now, here's the problem. People's gut microbiotas are different and highly variable. Even within a person, it can vary based on diet, age, health status, right?
Exposure to pesticides as well.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. And so all these things can impact urolithin production from elagitannins, right? And so you think, pomegranate extracts, these berry extracts, they're all associated with health benefits, and they're rich in elagitannins. And many researchers now say, well, wait a minute. Elagitannins and ellagic acid derived from elagitannins, it's not absorbed. So how can this really be meeting all these cognitive benefits, heart health benefits? Yeah. And so they think, well, it may be these urolithins. In fact, a lot think it is these urolithins as the connecting mechanism, right? And so I think there's going to be more research there. And we just saw the introduction of a synthetic urolithin introduced to the dietary supplement market. I saw an article about it the other day. It looks interesting, but again, it's exciting. We like to get out in front of the research sometimes with hype. It shows a lot of promise, but this is still an active area of research. And like I mentioned, they're showing that these aren't just antioxidants, they could be pro-oxidants. And so maybe the dose is important. You might get diminishing returns. And so we're seeing a lot of benefits. Again, the Prima V is standardized to 10.3% urolithins, either free or conjugated. And so, I take 500 milligrams. So I'm getting over 50 milligrams of this. Some of the research is looking at much higher levels, like 500 milligrams. So it'll be interesting to see, though, if that is the benefit over time, because we did talk about mitophagy earlier and this turnover of mitochondria. Well, some mitophagy is good. A lot of mitophagy is actually a signal for cell death. And so
right. So because your body's, there are so many mitochondria that are so dysfunctional, your body's trying to recycle too many of them, right? It's just like,
I just like to think too much of a good thing sometimes is not always beneficial. And so these are areas of research and follow the science and where the science supports safe and effective use. And that's what we pride ourselves on with our ingredients.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, this has been really, really fascinating. Thank you guys so much. I really look forward to hopefully doing a few more of these in the future, if you'd like, maybe on some of the other ingredients. So we'll definitely, if you're watching on YouTube, stay tuned. We'll have more in the future. Also, just for everybody, if you'd like to, you can go to check out in the description. We've got various links in there. We have a blog article on Shilajit, and we actually have a couple of them. And then, of course, we do have a coupon code that you can use to get a substantial discount on anything at CHOQ.com, but also, of course, specifically on our Shilajit, as well as our Men's Daily, which also contains 500 milligrams full active dose, research-based dose of Shilajit as well. So, again, thank you guys so much. This was incredibly enjoyable, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing it again.